Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another amazing interview at the Inner Changemaker. Today, we have a mega superstar guest with me. She is a behavioral investigator, and I love that she calls herself the chief investigator at her human behavior research lab, the Science of People. She is a quote-unquote professional people watcher, speaker, researcher. Essentially, she spent years studying the science, the research, the physiology, and pretty much how our body language and facial expressions tell the story of what is going on inside someone's brain. And this includes how to create relationships, how to know when someone's attracted to you. I watched her video on how to get rid of resting bitch face earlier today, how to detect a lie, how to be the most memorable person at the event. And she's such a pro that she's been a columnist for Entrepreneur Magazine, Huffington Post. Her courses have had thousands and thousands of people taking them. She's been featured everywhere from CNN to Forbes, NPR. Welcome to the show, Vanessa Van Edwards.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, we're so stoked to have you on here. And for those of you following, it is on all her social media. It is V Van Edwards. I guess Vanessa Van Edwards was taken on Instagram and on Twitter, or
too long. Too long.
That's a fair point. So let me ask you this. I thought this was really interesting, and before we dive into the whole interview, I was doing just a little touch of research, and I saw that you went to East China Normal University in China.
I did. Well, yeah, I was a Chinese major. One of my majors was Chinese, and so I don't know if you speak Chinese or not, but I'm happy to practice a little bit.
Well, so you did a degree out there. Like, tell us a little bit about like how many, like, you spent like a big chunk of your university years out there, or I guess your whole thesis was in Chinese.
So I was really thought I was on the social service, foreign service track. I really was interested in human behavior from a government perspective.
Okay.
And, and so I speak a couple languages. And so I was speaking English and Spanish. And then I was told Chinese was the way to go. I was fascinated by Chinese culture. And so one of my majors was Chinese, only because I studied abroad there and fell in love. I actually met my husband while I was studying abroad there. And spent a summer and a semester, and in that process also realized that if I was going to go down that track from a government perspective, I would be interrogating terrorists for the rest of my life. And that was something that I didn't want to do, and I knew that the travel that was involved was insane. So I was like, what if I could take human behavior and turn it into a business, like the business side of things, so not the government side, but the business side. And so that was how I ended up sort of getting into the people side of things. And they just picked it up in China, the book in China. So I'm very excited. I'll be able to do. I know I'll be able to do workshops in Chinese, and we also did it. They also just picked it up in Korea, which is awesome. And I also have science people trainers in China and in South Korea who do our workshops locally as well. So who knew that it would end up being like that, like crazy path? But I have a great love for East Asian studies.
Oh my God. Okay, so you don't know this because we just met like a few minutes ago. And by the way, we are here to talk about Captivate, your new book, The Science of Succeeding with People. And you have some really great stuff in here, which we're going to dive into. And so you don't know this, Vanessa, but I went to study at East China Normal University as well in Shanghai. And I did it a year. Like, that's like how my whole story started. Like, that's like almost the whole reason why I even have a podcast. Is because so super like long story short, like quit my job, wanted to do a year vagabonding in Asia. You and me both know, like, I speak Cantonese, so my Mandarin is like total crap when I landed in Shanghai, but you can't properly vagabond in Asia unless you speak Mandarin, right? And so I was like, I'll enroll myself in like some intensive Mandarin class. Okay. And so I went like every morning, like 8 a.m. to like, I was like, all these international students, everyone's like studying abroad. I'm like, I've been out of school for a few years, working for a few years. And check this out. I met my now girlfriend in China, in Shanghai at ECNU.
No, that's great. That's like
I'm not
very
making this
parallel.
up. I'm not making this up.
That's crazy. You know what? There's something. So we're talking about people, right? And I think that this is like I don't know where you were planning on starting, but I hope this resonates with you. So I have this theory that when you choose certain locations, so like, for example, studying abroad in China or enrolling as a foreigner in East China Normal University, you are going to put yourself in a certain group of a certain kind of like-minded person. So when I was an expat living in China, going and trying to make my way and learn how to cook Chinese food and buy a wok to cook my pot stickers for the first time, I was slowly, very carefully narrowing my scope to find people who were like-minded like me, right? Who had been drawn to this as well. So I met our best man in our wedding, my husband's best friend, my husband, friends who flew from all over the world, Paris and Africa and Asia, to come to our wedding, because I think that if you choose places that are polarizing, and I do mean like some people are like, oh, I could never do that. And some people are like, yes, I want to do it. Yeah. You actually find your people faster, which is the same exact principle I have with my brand and my business is I'd rather appeal to a few people voraciously and like fervently and turn off a couple people than appeal to everyone kind of, sort of, a little bit. Yeah.
Well, you're creating your raving fans, right? You're creating people that absolutely love the values that you stand for, not just like the content, and not just the social media and not just like the videos, but really understanding, and internalizing some of your concepts and some of the amazing stuff that you cover. And it's just phenomenal. And to be perfectly honest with you, I saw that and I was going to start that way no matter what. But I know that in your book, you also talk about you want to find common ground, right? So many people are stuck in this world of small talk, right? So, hey, Vanessa, how's the weather? Where are you from? Oh, West Coast. Oh, we're doing it. Yeah.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
So and I think that so first of all, it was a great place to start because it's awesome. It's a really unique thing, but you're right. It engages this concept of the similarity attraction effect. So when we talk about bonding with people, we like to say that opposites attract. And there's some truth to that in a different setting, which we're welcome to talk about.
Sure.
But actually what's more important is that the similarity attraction effect, that we are attracted to people who not only have similar values to us, but also are going to make us feel like, yes, this is me. I'm accepted for me. So in the best conversations, basically what you're doing is you're constantly hunting for me too's. So as you were listening to me talk about East China Normal University, you're like, oh my God, me too. I met my girlfriend there too. Oh my gosh, me too. I was vagabonding through Asia. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, me too. And it's like we have this little like, yay, me too party. Yeah. That is the best kind of conversation. I'm going to give you an example of this just happened to me, the opposite. Okay, you ready?
Okay.
So we just had a great Me Too moment. I'm feeling like super jazzed and bonded.
Yeah.
And hopefully listeners can hear it. The opposite happened last week. I was in the green room for a local morning show. Okay. This just happened. And in the green room, it's always an interesting place because people's emotions are running kind of high, right? Like they're about to go on air. They're very nervous, whatever they're there to promote or to talk about. And you know that other people in the room are probably interesting people as well. Sure. So I always try to make conversation with the other people in the green room. And it's a little bit hard because, again, the nerves are high. You don't know each other. So I asked the woman next to me, she was wearing an apron. I said, oh, are you doing a baking segment? She said, oh, yes, I'm opening a new bakery and I created a new kind of dessert. And I was like, oh, I love dessert. Me too, right? Mm-hmm. I love dessert. I have a total sweet tooth. She's like, oh, me too. I'm like, me too. We're going back and forth. And the woman sitting right there with us, I feel bad that we haven't included her. So I say, are you a total sugar fiend as well?
Yeah.
She goes, I quote, well, sugar is so bad for you. It basically kills your brain. This is like such a buzzkill.
Yeah.
Like the energy in the room, like, and like this, by the way, like context, this woman, her life is sugar. Okay. Right. Like, I know that she didn't mean it that way. Like I think that she did not come from a bad place. She was literally just trying to say like, it's not good for you. You should try to eat less sugar. Cause there's studies that show that sugar kills the brain. We know. I love Dr. Daniel Amen. He tells me all the time to not eat sugar.
Yeah.
But what happened in this conversation is it served as a wet blanket. And it made us feel like we didn't belong. like we were silly, like we were stupid, like we weren't taking care of ourselves. And so I think that the biggest mistake that we make in a lot of interactions is we accidentally buzzkill with good intentions.
Sure.
By either trying to fix people, right? Like correcting them and saying, oh, sugar is good for you. Right. Or by pointing out a difference that you think is making polite conversation, but is actually pulling you apart in those two things. And so like the difference here is like very palpable, like, just having that interaction with you. And so I think that if people who are listening can think about that is, are you typically a buzzkill in your conversations? Right?
Yeah. Talk about the truth, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. Or are you a buzzer? Like either one, like you're one or the other, or you're not participating at all. And so like, I think that it's really hard to get honest with ourselves and think about that, but it's a huge difference.
Yeah. And I love that you point this out, because I think so much, your book is very well put together, because it's very, everybody could relate to being awkward at that party where they only know one or two people. Everybody could relate. Maybe not everyone's been in the green room, but people can imagine that tensions are high, right? Everyone wants to look good. Everyone wants to seem smart, so, and everyone's been on receiving ends. They've been both people, right? They've probably been a buzzkill, and they probably, when tensions were high, they were being reactive, right? And they've probably been, super charismatic and super confident in the right setting. Right. And so I think so much of what you have to say is so relatable. But just a mini question on top of that, right? Like, so for that lady, I know for a lot of people listening, they go, well, maybe sugar is bad, right? Like, well, I believe that sugar is bad too. So what if, is it wrong for me to be inauthentic? Do you know what I mean? In that moment?
Yes. Great question.
What do you have to say to that?
Yeah. So this is such a great question. So I do not think that playing Me Too or doing yes and, right? Like the famous improv concept of taking what someone does and building on it. Yeah. I do not think that means that you have to lie, but it does mean that you have a choice. So in that moment, in her head, she had a choice. She could choose to go down the direction of, I'm going to fix them. I'm going to give them information on sugar not being healthy. Or I'm going to ask questions to figure out why sugar is so important to them. Now, one of those is telling. It involves zero curiosity. Right. And it's not creating anything. The other one is something where she could maybe learn something. For example, sugar is bad for you, right? I know this, and I still love sugar. In fact, like, I think there's a whole emotional tie to sugar. If she had instead turned that into a question and said, my gosh, so have you guys always been sugar queens, or is that kind of a new thing? Right? There's a question. Or, I always have been fascinated by our cravings, and sugar is one of those like foods that we love it. Do you think there's any emotional connection there? Right? Like any question like that would have produced, I think, and I know this because when she said that, I was like, oh, what a buzzkill, right? Like in my head, I was like, oh,
buzzkill.
And I began to try to ask those questions. We ended up having a pretty good conversation. If she had started with that, I think it would have been an even better conversation. I would have liked her a little bit more, right? Like,
sure.
Like we would have just bonded more. Yeah. And so I think that you have this choice in most interactions where it's not, are you going to be right or are you going to be liked? It's not quite that. Yeah. But I think there is a way to be curious and be liked. Right. And maybe in the context of those questions, you can say, gosh, like it's so nice to hear you guys talk about sugar in this way, because I've always been plagued by it. Right. Like I read these studies about how sugar is bad for me, but like I crave it and I want it. So then I go through this thing where I don't eat it. And I would have been like, oh, I have that too. Right. Like, and that would have been a Me Too moment of my own struggle with how much I love it and how much it's not healthy. So I'm just using it as an example, but I think that we can harvest that into curiosity as opposed to being inauthentic, which is the biggest mistake I think a lot of people make. They either feel like they have to lie and be fake, or be right and fix people. And I think there's somewhere in between. Yeah,
you mentioned that in your quiz. I love how you started the book with like a quiz, just to kind of give people kind of a landscape of where they are.
How'd you do on it? It's a IQ quiz. How'd you do?
It was a tricky one, because I failed at, I'll tell you where I failed, and this is why I really wanted us to do the interview. I failed at almost all the facial expressions. I was like, as if, right? But I knew some of the ones that you were asking. I remember exactly. It was like my score was like over 100. It was like
Yeah.
130. So
Yes.
I was
Okay.
I was like right there, but I couldn't, one thing I noticed, I was like, I got all the faces wrong. I was like,
Yeah.
what? And so
Okay.
that's something I wanted you to talk about, because I know you're literally on the cover and there's all these like really positive words, and you have an amazing book trailer. So talk to us a little bit about these micro expressions, and like, why was I've never trained in anything in face reading or anything like that. So like, what are some of the, I guess, commonalities you see for individuals and people?
Yeah. So I was hooked by microexpressions right from the beginning. So I
Yeah.
also wasn't naturally good at it. And when I read microexpression science many, many years ago, I was like fascinated by it. And I originally thought about it from a government perspective, right?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this would be so great for Secret Service agents, for TSA agents, all that stuff. So it hooked me immediately. And what was interesting to me is that our facial expressions are not learned. And that is one of the biggest misconceptions that we have about facial expressions and nonverbal. We think, or we used to think, that when a baby was born, the baby looked at its mother or father's face and mirrored it. And that's how we learn facial expressions. But actually, babies who are congenitally blind, so babies who've been blind since birth,
Okay.
they make the exact same facial expressions at the exact same time as seeing children. That means that something about our facial expressions and the way that we express emotions
Yeah.
is coded, is genetic. The reason why that's powerful for us is because if it's not learned, it's not cultural. It's not gender-based. It's not economic stat. It's not different. A
Right.
rich person is not going to be different than a poor person.
Right.
Or like someone across the world is not going to show different expressions from somewhere here. So that's where I went, this is something very powerful. So what we have to understand about facial expressions is, one, is that they are universal, and there's been 7 universal facial expressions or micro expressions that have been discovered.
Sure.
And also that our micro expressions are a loop. And what I mean by this is, it's not just that we have an emotion and it causes our facial expression. So we feel anger, feel that anger in our chest, and it pulls our eyebrows down, and we harden our lower lips, and we tense our eyelids, and we have this anger expression. It's also that I could be totally neutral and make the anger expression. So harden my eyebrows. You can pull your eyebrows together. You can try this with me. Pinch your eyebrows together, harden your lower lids, and press your mouth into a hard line. If you begin to hold that expression, you begin to feel irritated.
Yeah.
That is a crazy feedback loop, and it is the basis of empathy.
I remember, I love that you just pointed that out. And for people that are watching this, we're like making faces at each other. Like,
yes,
kind of like, but it's good, right? Because it's expressive, right? And I remember, I remember it was like doing business school. I was doing like an internship for, it was like a sales type of internship. And they would have like top salespeople come chat with all the interns, for example. And I'll never forget this. They're like, if you're having a bad day, if you're being reactive, right? Try forcing yourself to smile. Just like force yourself to smile, right? And we're like, well, this is really cheesy. You know what I mean? Like, people are here like, force yourself to smile. You're going to be kidding me. But what ends up happening, right, is if you actually do it, if you're like having a bad day, you can try this now. As you force yourself to do it, at first it just feels kind of weird. You're just like, you're forcing it, but your brain starts picking up that, you are someone that is smiling. You must be happy. Right. And it's almost like it creates those neural pathways. And that was always like a hack. Yeah. Go ahead.
And what's interesting about that hack is there's so much implication from it, because one is people who have Botoxed their smile wrinkles, specifically right here, those crow's feet on the side of the eyes, feel less happy as long as the Botox is in their face.
No way.
So yes.
Wow.
If you want, so an easier way to hack this, by the way, so yes, you can force yourself to smile. And one way that you can do this is you can put a pen in between your teeth and then try to raise your lips as high as possible. So if you're like at work and you feel weird being like, just like blatant smiling, what you can do is put a pen between your teeth and then just have it between your teeth and widen your cheeks as much as possible. That will activate those smile muscles on the sides of your face. So that, there's a lot of physiology here that's going on. Like, I think that we have a lot more to discover about facial expressions. Like, why is it that a smile can literally make us feel happier? What does it activate? Is it serotonin? Does it lower our cortisol levels? What is happening physiologically? But there are definitely changes. And that is why I think facial expressions are important, because another little hack I'll give you is, if you are ever with someone and you really want to tap into how they feel,
Yeah.
the best thing you can do is mimic their face and see how you feel. So Edgar Allan Poe actually accidentally discovered this. He has a famous quote that says, if I ever don't understand how someone is feeling, I arrange my face as theirs and see what emotions arise. This works all the time. If I'm with someone, I'm negotiating, I'm with a client, I'm on a video call, and I'm like, where are they at? Like, what are they feeling? I will sit in the body language they are in. I will make the face that they are making, and I'll see, what do I feel at this moment? It's an incredible empathy exercise, and I highly, highly recommend it.
That sounds crazy, because I was totally going to ask you, like if you're hiring someone, right? Or if you're trying to qualify someone, right? Whether you're trying to hire them or maybe get hired, maybe you're on a date, maybe you're just qualifying them as a student, or maybe someone in your inner circle, right? I was going to ask, how do you figure those things out? What are the things that you really look for? I love that you said that, because it's something that you can easily kind of do right at the moment. But let me ask you maybe a different variation, which is, have you ever come across people that are deemed like unreadable? You know what I mean? Because there's always like a level of like skepticism whenever you hear anything in personal development or any like kind of new thing. They're like, well, I'm unreadable, or this person is totally unreadable. I have no pulse on who they are. Has that ever happened to you, or what kind of advice or suggestions you have in that situation?
Sure. So there are 3 different kind of exceptions to the universal microexpression rule that are just good to keep in mind. And by the way, anyone who ever tells you that something is 100% applicable, no. Right? Like there's just no way. Sure. Okay, from a scientific perspective. So one is anyone who's had any kind of like facial injury, or someone who's had a stroke. Sometimes they'll lose ability to control muscles in their face. That's one. Second is there has been some evidence that people on the Asperger's and autism spectrum show and read facial expressions differently. That's very, very important to know, because that's obviously a social feedback loop. Yeah. In fact, one of our online courses that we do a lot of people skills, we have, I'm so grateful. It was posted in one of the adult Asperger's communities. And so a lot of students, our students are adults with high functioning Asperger's. Yeah. And they have told us it's the only course they've ever taken on people skills that they can actually understand and relate to. Incredible. And I think it's because they don't naturally have the facial expression feedback loop, but they can learn it in a formulaic way, right? So for us, we might spontaneously show anger, or like we have that feedback loop. Yeah. But if you don't have that feedback loop, or your feedback loop is a little bit off, you can learn this manually. That's what I also like about it, is you don't have to be born with it. You can also lever it up. The last category is the hardest category. So it's a very small percent of the population that are stony-faced. They have been able to cultivate a very still, less expressive face. Now, there are not as many of them as you think. Yeah. What I think is more interesting is maybe you won't be able to read them as well, but isn't it interesting to figure out who those people are and why? If you meet a boss or a potential partner who is literally just still-faced, almost no expressiveness, no emotional feedback loop, I think that tells you far more than any microexpression ever could. Because there's going to be something with their empathy loop. And if empathy is a huge important part of your business, or something that you want in your relationships, you might have a hard time in that relationship.
Fascinating. And for people that are watching this and listening to this, I mean, Vanessa is really taking things at an in-depth level. I mean, I've gone through her book. I mean, she has a chart in there telling you where to stand in the party so you're not too awkward, and then which zone and why. I mean, it's very scientific. I love the quirkiness of it. So make sure to go pick up a copy of Captivate, and then let us know on Twitter or on Instagram, whichever channel works for you guys, V Van Edwards, and let us know the amount of value she's dropping is crazy. I
will say that I think that if you're the kind of person where you always found like people sort of enigmatic, like they were like kind of a big mystery, which is the way that it was for me. Yeah. And I was always told growing up, be yourself, just make friends. Like, oh my gosh, my parents, and I love them, but they would send me to camp and I was like trembling with fear because I was like this really anxious child. And they would send me to camp and they'd be like, pat my head, like, just make friends. That was like telling me make the sky green. Like it was like, it's like, what? Like, where do you even go? So I wish there was some sort of like very textbook resource where soft skills became very clear, very formulaic. If you think that way, that's how I think.
Yeah.
And so that's a much clearer way. It kind of brings control back to social interactions, because I was a very highly anxious social interactor. And now I feel like I have a lot more control in my social interactions.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the piece that I was trying to fit.
No, for sure. And if you get the book, you could see a really funny picture that Vanessa included of herself in literally the first few pages. So we'll leave that as kind of a cliffhanger. I have last two questions here for you. One's more of a personal one, and we'll start there. But since, I mean, I'm so glad that we started the whole ECNU thing, the China thing, because I had no idea that you met your husband there. Yeah. But I'm really curious, like, since you've been doing this work, right, of experiments and studying people and probably studying the people around you, how has this work impacted like your own personal life? How have you found the impact of this work on your relationships, the way you build your company? Tell us a little bit about that from the perspective of you being kind of the chief investigator of all this.
Yeah. You know, it's shaped everything, and not always ways that were easy. I had to make a choice it was actually right before my wedding.
Okay.
Where I was working with, bridesmaids, groomsmen, always a big choice.
Yeah.
And I had to make this choice where I caught someone in a lie. I do a lot of lie detection research at my lab. And I had to decide if I wanted to live in hard truth or ignorant bliss. I know that sounds like a crazy choice, but I think that is the choice we make a lot of the time if we really want to see what's in front of us and deal with it and tackle it and address it and go through that process. Or if we're just like, hey, we're good with this, let bygones be bygones, it's okay. I don't need to go deep. So I made the choice to live in hard truth, and that has meant really being very highly curating my relationships for higher quality and less quantity.
Yeah.
And that was a decision that I made many years ago. And I encourage my readers to also make that choice. I don't believe in ambivalent relationships. I don't believe in ignorant bliss. And I think that it's always better to find truth.
I love that. I love that. Truth will set you free. It's what they say. And it's a tough road, though, but you can definitely get there a little easier, at least with Vanessa's help. Vanessa, last question here for you. The show itself, it's called The Inner Changemaker. I'm always curious to see what comes to mind for you when you think of the word changemaker or someone who is a changemaker.
Actually, that ties in perfectly to what we were talking about with truth. So I think that when I think about being an inner changemaker, I think about being willing to see truth about yourself. So I asked at the very beginning of this video, this recording, are you the buzzkill? And I have lots of kind of sassy questions like that, like I have a whole chapter on difficult people. And one of the questions I ask is like, are you the difficult person? So I think that as we go about the world trying to make it better, right? I think a lot of people who are listening to your show are change makers for good. They're setting up amazing businesses. They're coaching people. They're trying to impact the world in a positive way. You also have to make sure that you're asking yourself some of the same hard questions. So if you're helping others, does it start with you first? And I think that that's something that I try really hard to see all the dirty truths in my life about myself before I even begin to help others.
Yeah, and so much of what we do and so much of probably what you do, you embody that, right? In your relationships, you embody that in every conversation. And with that, I just want to take like 5 seconds and acknowledge you, for the amazing work that you're doing and for being someone who believes in the truth and wants to create more truth in your life and in the world. So that's not necessarily an easy journey, but it's awesome to have you there to help support us with your books, your videos, and the content you create. So from the whole Changemaker community, thank you so much, Vanessa, for coming on.
Well, thank you for always championing truth and having me on. It was a great interview.
Okay, we'll see you next time, Vanessa.
Bye.